Hello everyone, welcome to Of God in Mind. I'm going to return now to our Acts series with Acts 3. So I'll start reading. One day, Peter and John were going up to the temple at the time of prayer, at 3 in the afternoon. Now a man who was lame from birth was being carried to the temple gate called Beautiful, where he was put every day to beg from those going into the temple courts. When he saw Peter and John about to enter, he asked them for money. Peter looked straight at him, as did John. Then Peter said, "Look at us." So the man gave them his attention, expecting to get something from them. Then Peter said, "Silver or gold I do not have, but what I do have I give you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, walk." Taking him by the right hand, he helped him up, and instantly the man's feet and ankles became strong. He jumped to his feet and began to walk. Then he went with them into the temple courts, walking and jumping and praising God. When all the people saw him walking and praising God, they recognized him as the same man who used to sit begging at the temple gate called Beautiful, and they were filled with wonder and amazement at what had happened to him. While the man held on to Peter and John, all the people were astonished and came running to them in the place called Solomon's Colonnade. When Peter saw this, he said to them, "Fellow Israelites, why does this surprise you? Why do you stare at us as if by our own power or godliness we had made this man walk? The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of our fathers, has glorified his servant Jesus. You handed him over to be killed, and you disowned him before Pilate, though he had decided to let him go. You disowned the holy and righteous one and asked that a murderer be released to you. You killed the author of life, but God raised him from the dead. We are witnesses of this. By faith in the name of Jesus Christ, this man whom you see and know was made strong. It is Jesus' name and the faith that comes through him that has completely healed him, as you can see." Alright. So, this chapter here, we see couple of things happening. The main one is that this man is healed. Now personally, I don't really know all too much. Healings have always been a bit of a tricky thing for me. They obviously aren't something we see much in the modern West, and there's a lot of the Bible that seems to go against the idea of expecting everything to be healed and to come out nicely in this side of the world, and yet you also have examples such as this, where people are healed, and others where it says to ask for healing. So it's always been a bit of a tricky point for me. So I don't have a whole lot to actually say on this. But there is a couple of things I've noticed going through this passage. So first off, this quote in 6 is a really cool sort of motto, I suppose, that we could have going forwards. So, silver or gold I do not have, but what I do have. Silver or gold I do not have, but what I do have I give you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, walk. So I just kind of love that as a quote, that what we have to give to people, like we mightn't always have money, we mightn't always have gold, we don't always have the things that, the sort of material things that they need, but it's not as if the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth is nothing for them. Sure, it mightn't have as much of an effect as having them leap up and walk, but I mean, if you're listening to this, and I know it's true in my case, the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth has done a whole bunch of healing in your life. Not from physical things, but from other issues that you've had, from, well, one, it heals us from issues that we have going forwards into the future. It will heal us from death, and will heal us from the things that we've done wrong, the things that have made us enemies of God. But even here and now, there's a lot that we get from having Jesus in our life, being able to rely on him for the things that he gives us, having that purpose and that trust that he's given us. So it's a pretty good thing to keep in mind as you go about life, that we have something great, something healing with us. Now onto the sort of physical healing we see here. So the other sort of thing I notice that I think is very important to this whole thing is verse 12 here. So I really wouldn't do that. When Peter saw this, he said to them, "Fellow Israelites, why does this surprise you? Why do you stare at us as if by our own power or godliness we had made this man walk?" So this, like the other sort of hesitation I have with a lot of miraculous healings, and your sort of stereotypical healings out in the middle of a desert in a tent, that sort of thing, is often these are focused on the person. These can often very easily become focused on the person conveying the healing. But here we have Peter and Paul going, this has nothing to do with us. It's not our own power, or it's not our own godliness, the way we act, our closeness to God, our faith. That has nothing to do with what has made this man walk. What's made this man walk was our God, the God of our fathers, and what he's done through Jesus. So there's sort of like often a lot of the things with healing is it can often become very easy to fall into ideas of sort of, well, you weren't healed because you weren't good enough, you didn't have enough faith, or the person healing you didn't have enough faith that it would happen, or various things like that. And yet it's a lot more complicated than that. This man was healed, others were not. We have examples of other things, such as, for example, Paul talks about the thorn in his side. As you go on through his letters, and there's a pretty good theory on that, is that he was going blind, he was losing his eyesight, and that was the sort of thorn keeping him from being proud. And he prayed for that to go away. It was Paul, he had plenty of faith. He trusted God and his power a lot, but he still remained with whatever that thorn was, remained blind, remained crippled, whatever it was that it was tormenting him. That didn't go away. And Jesus, when healing he heals a man at some point, and then either the disciples or the crowd asks him afterwards, who sinned to make this man blind? Was it him or his parents? Because he was blind from birth. And Jesus said, neither. This man was blind so that the glory of God could be shown through him, or something to that effect. The idea of, this man was blind so that I could have this moment, so that it could come together to be healed. And other times, like in Paul's case, the disability is for the person's own benefit. In Paul's case, it was to keep him from being proud. There's always sort of, and I know that's easy for me to say, sort of sitting here being healthy and so forth, but there's always sort of a purpose in, there's purposes in everything. God's weaving together this picture, and he's got much more in mind in our life than just our happiness. There's the eternal perspective, there's preparing us for heaven, there's helping us to live properly down here. So many different things, so many different lessons that he has to teach us, and not all of them can be taught through being happy and healthy. We see that with Job. So the end of Job, and this is a bit of a sort of allegorical interpretation, I'm not sure it's entirely intended, but one ways Job ends, so the story of Job, a righteous man is made to suffer because Satan thinks he's only righteous because God's made him prosperous. So to prove Satan wrong and to provide that example for later generations, God let Satan do to Job. Well, he lets him do a lot of things to Job apart from injuring his person and so forth. And Job stays there at the end of it, but he becomes sort of bitter. But then at the end, you get this nice line of where Job says, after God appears in a hurricane to Job and tells him, essentially doesn't answer any of his questions. Job is like, why did you let this happen? What is happening? And God essentially says, who are you to question me, who does all these miraculous things in heaven and earth, who knows everything that's going on and who has purpose for all this stuff. And sort of Job ends that with, my ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. And I sort of like the interpretation of that it was, he'd heard of God before, he'd seen, and he followed God, he was a very righteous man, but it was only once he'd experienced that suffering as well, once he'd had that test, and once he'd seen sort of the harsh side of life and the things that God sort of does for him as well, that he could truly say he's seen God, when he's seen God in riches and in poorness, in sickness and in health. That's sort of when he truly knew who God was. But anyway, that's essentially all I wanted to say about this passage. I don't have any great insights on the passage itself for miracles. As I said, difficult issue for me, but there's a couple of things for you to think about that will hopefully help you out with thinking through this stuff. Anyway, see you next time.